that's back to that thing about what is Bunbury. Where we are sitting right now, within half an hour's drive, is basically every industry anyway. So, like, we can be anything we want to be.
Yep.
And what I think Bunbury needs to be is we need to be the centre for that. We don't need to compete with all these things. We don't need to compete about Busselton. Busselton's always going to have this very strong tourism, and especially holiday tourism in terms of school holidays, because, I mean, you've got all those camps along the waterfront anyway. They've clearly got a lot of holiday homes down there. I think over 30% of their rate notices get shipped outside, which is interesting.
Really?
Yeah, so that's always going to be a different thing.
What's the population of Bustle, do you know?
Similar to us, about 30,000. But they've got huge land, obviously, between Bustle.
So that's 30,000 without any crazy surrounding suburbs, though.
Yeah,
really, like
they got between, so Busselton and Dunsborough is all part of the Busselton local government.
Okay.
So quite a big area through there, including Vass and things like that. So that's Vass.
Oh, that doubles down on my point. You know, it's like you've got, if you said it was Busselton plus, you know, Margaret River, I mean, you say that Bunbury has 30, but realistically, we've got like 100. Like,
yeah, the Greater Bunbury area, and the Greater Bunbury area is about 110, which includes Harvey, Dardanup, and Capel.
Right.
Should know those pretty quickly. But when you're talking about what we talk about as almost the urban population, which when you exclude sort of Capel itself, sort of out of Dardanup and those kind of things, but just look at the urban area, so being Australian Eaton and Dalyellup, you're probably talking near on 90,000.
Yeah.
You know, basically within 10 kilometres of where we're sitting here.
Well,
so,
I just think that you can start at like Dalyellup, like beach area, and you can drive all the way through, like, what is it, like Withers, South Bunbury, along the Ocean Drive, come all the way past like the Forum, keep going. Well, even if you don't go to the Forum, if you go that road that you're talking about where they're building the bridge, go all the way out to Australind, you can consistently see houses the whole way.
Yep.
There's no real break and everything. Like, you go to Capel, you got to spend some time on the highway. If you go to Harvey, you got to spend some time on the So I think that Australind to Dalyellup sort of like catchment being 90,000 people compared to like Busselton to Dunsborough is 30,000. That's bananas.
Yeah. Crazy. And then you look, but they've obviously their expansion, they've got a huge amount of greenfield sites there, which we don't. So that'll probably be, and when I say 30,000, it may well be higher than that now, because I think that was a few years ago. But yeah, no, you're right. It's everything inside the outer ring road, the new outer ring road should be considered, and probably get in trouble for this, but I've been starting to say it more and more publicly now. It does need to be one local government area. I'm not saying it becomes Bunbury, but yeah.
Even I found out the other day, I think it was on the pod, about the Southwest Sports Centre costs a certain amount per year, and the majority of the users are people coming from Dalyellup. Yeah,
not majority, but over a third for Dalyellup residents. So $2 million operating costs near on for the run of that facility, mainly for the pool because of expensive pool.
Yeah.
But yeah, they all come from Dalyellup. So yeah, and we've spoken to Capel about that, and the same with and this is where it's very difficult as a city. We've got the sports centre, the entertainment centre, the art gallery, the museum. They're regional facilities, but our ratepayers, or our 30,000 people, will pick up the cost of that to run the cost for 100,000 people. So it's very difficult. They have this grant allocation, which the federal government pay for, and it goes based on each shire and what you provide. So we get a bit out of that, but the percentage that's considered for regional facilities is very little. So in fact, we get less than our neighbouring shires through that grant process, because they do have a lot of unsealed roads they need to do. So the unsealed road compartment, and something like Harvey is a big area space, so they actually get a much higher grant than we do because of some of the wider area there are.
Right.
But yeah, we supply those facilities, and it just doesn't make sense. And to have, so there's 139 local governments in WA.
Yep.
It's just too many.
Is there a process where they could
amalgamate? Yeah, so it will. John Kerry is the Minister of Local Government. I spoke to him about it when he was Minister of Local Government. He's no longer anymore, and he goes, "Oh yeah, it just makes perfect sense, especially Bunbury." And I said, "Well, it needs to be a state government direction." He goes, "Yeah, it's not on our agenda because they say it's political turmoil because it's caused issues previously." John Castrilli tried to do it, and he's got an interesting story, and he'd be an interesting person to get on here and have a chat.
John Castrilli's like 2 terms ago, though, isn't he?
So he was a member for Bunbury. He was a mayor, but he was a minister for local government. So
yeah, but also, was he not before Homegirl? What's her name? It's just been replaced by Ben Small.
Nola. No, state. John was at the state level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So he was state level local government minister. So he had he reviewed some of the boundary changes, and he's got an interesting story, and I probably can't say much in his part, but he was talking about, basically had 2 Perth shires who were talking about amalgamation, and he was keen to go through. And he said they went through the process and it all stacked up and got to the 11th hour, and one of them said, no, we don't want to do this anymore. And that put the end of the whole thing. So
Interesting.
he said he's made some changes, which if it ever looks in again, it can be much easier.
Yep.
But, again, if you're talking, and there's some areas where, it definitely would be a political nightmare because you have different, and if you're looking at some of those sort of rural shires out in the wheat belt and whatnot, like there might be 5,000 people over the space of
crazy
100,000 acres kind of thing. So even more, like it just creates 100 when you start doing it. So huge things, which is where you're trying to say, well, they need to amalgamate. Well, one of them might actually be an urban centre and the rest of it's rural. So I get those and how you navigate that. But in our particular area, like as I said, right now we're sitting within 5 minutes drive of where we are. We've got, 4 administration buildings, 40 councillors, a whole bunch of obviously directors and whatever it may be, and different services which do sort of the same thing. So there has been a direction to try and look at what we do collaboratively anyway, and some of that's happening, but quite often we sit in these meetings and we have some great ideas, but then you get back and you worry about your constituents.
You just go, back to you.
So
but surely the idea would be that if we've got 4 situations that are all doing generally the same thing, that putting them all under one banner and one roof would only optimize the results.
Yep. And results, but also around decision making. And we've spoken to Capel about it and saying, well, where we've got our current facility, obviously your day up using as a reason, we need to look at how we can leverage that and saying effectively we should be writing you a check and going writing you an invoice and saying here's 500,000. Now, that didn't go down that well, and I think one of the comments around, well, our residents are looking at indoor pool anyway, so we're thinking about maybe we could look at building one. It's no, don't do that. We got capacity here.
Yeah.
Just look at supporting
this one's
us.
built if you want to.
Same with, so obviously at the moment, one of the major projects is basketball courts, and happy to talk about that later because we've got some good outcomes on that, but we need to build some indoor basketball courts. At the last state election, Shire of Dardanup got commitment for extra basketball courts as well. They're the X amount of million. I'm sure they need them, but we're going to build 8 here, they're going to build 8. Why wouldn't we just go let's look at a bird's eye view of this and going, well, where's the best place? Put it smack bang in the middle and let's just put 20 courts there or something. Rather than just, so you could actually make some really good planning going, well, no, we don't need to build another skate park because we've got one 10 metres away, 10 Ks away. I know Capel working through a youth precinct. I'm not saying that's not needed. I'm sure it is in that community part of Daliella. But, again, that's probably a bad example because that might not be used. But if we're looking at doing something right here and Shire of Dardanup are progressing doing the same thing and we're both fighting for the same money, while as one government or one authority, we could say, right, this is a priority. This not saying this isn't a priority, but we're going to focus all our attention on this, get this done, and then we'll move to that one. So
also,
rather than competing on the same pool of funding.
The things that we're talking about as well are all like Bunbury's at such a cool, especially when we talk about that extended population number. Bunbury's at this really interesting spot where you have something like South Bunbury Football over where they've built all of these great resources and now we've got AFL games here.
Yeah.
So then you go, okay, well, I don't know enough about sport, honestly, but surely a 20-set basketball stadium that has all the facilities that surround that would also, what do you call it, like attract
that, yeah, sure.
that next tier or maybe a tier above that of professional sports coming to Bunbury. And then what does that do? Then all of a sudden, instead of there being 2 basketball things, you build a big hotel over here and a big basketball thing over here. So when they come, there's actually somewhere for them to stay.
Yep. See, in paper, it works really well, isn't it? So it's just, but it's that, and I get it too, because people go, oh, you're going to do that, people are going to lose their jobs, whatever it may be, but it's not going to happen tomorrow, but we need to transition to start working. And I had a look, and I need to probably look into it more, but so Jeff Kennett, when he was in over obviously at Victoria, and he said, this is what we're doing. And he just forced amalgamation, right? And said, this is what we're doing over the next 5 years. We are going to go from X amount of councils down to this. And that was a lot of inner suburb stuff as well, and said, you're done. Very, very controversial. A lot of people weren't happy, but that was 50 years ago, whatever it was, or how long Kennett was there, so not that long ago. But from what you read now and some of the research was done, they just say, even the biggest critics now are saying, oh, look, it actually worked pretty well. Because you had a whole bunch of local governments who
didn't want change.
But then they were also didn't have any money, so they were going broke. And Victoria, most of the a lot of the eastern state councils, or all of them, are actually capped on what they can raise their rates by. So you can put your rates up by, and the government of the day, state government go, right, you can put the rates up by 1% this year. That's it. So they go ahead and said, right, here's our budget. And oh, by the way, we're running all these facilities. You're going to put your rate up 1%. All our costs are going up that. So a lot of them are going broke because they can't afford to do
1% is not even CPI though.
Well, whatever the game. So normally the government do say CPI, but they might just say, look, things are tough. We're going to mandate you putting 2.5% up. Again, so that's what it would be.
Yep.
And then what ends up happening, and we actually interviewed someone who was going through a process, he was from the Eastern Coast CEO, and we were speaking to him about, during the CEO process, and we were saying, right, tell us about some of the tough times you had as CEO. He goes, well, about the East Coast thing. So they can apply to go for extra funding, like if they need to. And he said, I was CEO of this council, and I won't know no names, but he said, effectively, they'd been running on this thing, on this bare bones budget for whatever. They come along and said, right, we need to raise our rates and we have to apply for an exemption. And the state government said, no, you're not going to get one. And they wanted like a 40% increase. And the state government said, that's not going to happen. So I said, okay. So he just said, I shut down the library, shut down the museum, and shut down something else. And they said, obviously, the community went ballistic. And eventually the state government said, what are you going to do? He said, well, we can't afford it. So they ended up having a 100% rate increase over a 2-year period to open back up their facilities.
Wow.
But the community wants all these stuff. Local government got a charge if they couldn't do it, and they just said, we got to do this. And council supported him. He said, well, that's why I'm applying for a new job, actually. But anyway, that's how they were when it's mandated. So, yeah, well, that's just the example of how extreme it can do. And we're seeing it a little bit happen here in our WA local governments. A lot of councils' rates are going up above CPI because we got these smaller, and again, if we use the example, Bunbury's got this. We want all our ratepayers want certain things, and that's fine. And so do Capel's residents, and so do Harvey's residents, and they're actually seeing things happen over there and going, oh, Bunbury's got this, we want this. Or where our ratepayers are going, oh, Harvey just built a new thing on their foreshore, we want one of those.
Yep.
Again, not looking at the overarching picture, and all of a sudden, as we have more and more demands, limited resources, and the only way to either not match those demands, which means we can do that, or you raise your rates. And we've seen that over the last couple of years, the rates are going up. So I think the only way that we could be feasible in the long term is actually going, we need to amalgamate all of these. And
yeah, well, I mean, you got Project A that's happening here and Project B happening over there that's worth the same amount of money, say it's $10 million each. It'd be great if you're all under the same banner. Instead of fighting for 10, you could agree on 15 for one, and then hopefully 15 for something else that sort of supports it rather than just mimicking it.
Well, it helps a lot with federal funding too, isn't it? When you go over there, I've been over to Canberra a few times pledging for a few different projects, and you sort of go, oh, where the City of Bunbury, and they bring it up on the computer. Oh, and it's Greater Bunbury, by the way, 100,000 people, not 30,000 people.
Yeah,
you really got
true.
And obviously a local member clearly gets that when it's Forest, which goes the whole way down anyway. But then
so how does that work if you have someone who represents Forest, and then within Forest you've got bloody 20 different shires and councils and
crazy?
Yeah, interesting.
But because then you start talking about the Southwest, and that's always our pitch when we go to federal, and we normally do that in line with Bustleton, and we haven't done it for a while. What we used to was go, well, we're here on behalf of the Southwest, and now we're talking 300,000 people from sort of Pinjarra all the way through to Margaret River. We're going, well, we're actually 300,000 people. So over you guys in the feds need to understand. And of course, WA members get it, and clearly our local member gets it. But when you go over there and you're talking to whoever it may be, the regional minister, which is McBain, or was McBain, I'm assuming she still is. I haven't seen the cabinet reshuffle now. But they're looking at Bunbury and going, oh, okay, well, Bendigo's got 300,000 people. Bunbury's got 30,000 people. They want some regional facilities. You guys want. So that's where we need to say, hang on, no, we're the Southwest. Because you're in Bendigo, it's the same sort of thing as being in Greater Bunbury, realistically. We're talking 150,000 people.
Dude, have you been to Bendigo, Ballarat, that whole area? I
haven't for a while. I played cricket over there a couple of times in Ballarat. But yeah, I haven't been for some time now.
Dude, it feels like you're in like some ancient like English city, like beautiful architecture, and like you go down the main street, it would take you a full day to walk from one end of the main street to the other in Ballarat.
Yeah.
Like we literally went to the main street day after day, and I was like, oh, we're on a different street to where we were yesterday, obviously, and then got in the car and drove for a couple minutes, and I was like, oh no, this is where we were yesterday. It's the same street.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it, and it's crazy to think like, we're talking about before the definition or distinction of the town, you go, Bunbury is still one of those places where you go like, I'm going to go down the main street and grab a coffee. And that sort of makes sense. If you say that in Perth, you're like, oh, you could be talking about one of 12 streets, but Ballarat still has that, yet it's a massive place,
Yeah, well, again, it's just down to population. If you look at Melbourne's population and that's spread to regional areas, and again, WA being behind, it'll continue here. Like that's where we want Bunbury to be in the next 20 years or whatever it may be, and we're seeing it a bit. There's been a study that was just released, so the Regional Institute of Australia who do regional studies. The last 2 quarters, Bunbury has been the highest percentage regional city in Australia. It's Australia-wide of people moving from capital cities to a regional city.
Really?
So there's been this trend over the last sort of pretty much since COVID, but even prior to that, of people moving out of capital cities. So they measure people moving to capital cities and people moving out. And the trend's been moving away from capital cities. So moving from Perth to regions.
That's why this house is worth like $50,000 more than what it was in 6 months ago.
Yeah, yep. Like so it's huge, and Bunbury is the national leader in that space because, clearly that's just happening across the road. But yeah, so hopefully that'll continue to be a thing here.